Hey, Emu. So thank you for coming back here. I'm excited to share with you what I think is a story underneath the surface of the text that has to do with the Exodus, but it's a story that I think gets to the question that we ended our last session with, which is when we heard God's voice at Sinai, and when that voice took the sound of the shofar, was that just a blind fact? Was it just a cry that was nothing more than that? It was God's voice and that's it. And it's important to remember because it was God's voice and that makes it important. Or did God's voice have an intention behind it? Was there a mystery behind that voice? Was there something we're supposed to understand behind that voice? And I think the answer is yes, there was something we were supposed to understand from that voice. And to see what it is, we actually need to go back to the verses before Sinai because that intention has been building for a long time. It's been building ever since God decided to redeem the people of Israel in the first place. And I want to show you how that story built.
Welcome back, everybody. So, in order to get a deeper understanding of the shofar on Rosh Hashanah, we had dug into the meaning of the shofar at the revelation at Sinai. But now, we had to go back even further, back to the burning bush. As the Reforman said, we're heading back there because his hunch is that this is where we'll find the roots of what God intended to express in that shofar at Sinai. Now, obviously, there is no shofar at the burning bush, but I invite you to join me in trusting Rabbi Foreman that he's taking us back there for a reason, and to go on this close reading journey with us through the beginning of the Exodus over the next couple of episodes. It will ultimately transform our understanding of the shofar at Sinai and even Rosh Hashanah. Okay, so we're actually going to start with the verses right before the burning bush to discover what might have spurred God to reveal himself to Moshe at that moment. And that's going to set us up for the question Rabbi Foreman really wants to hone in on. What exactly God was trying to communicate to Moshe at that critical encounter? Here we go. I'm Emu Shalev, and this is Aleph Betas, a book like no other, generously sponsored by Shari and Nathan Lindenbaum.
All right, Emu. So we are going to begin from the very end of Exodus chapter 2 with the prologue to the burning bush. A lot of bad stuff has happened in Egypt. There's slavery going on. There's all sorts of bad things going on. But then something happens. Like Exodus chapter 2, verse 23.
Vayhi bayamim harabim hahem, in those many, many days in Egypt, vayamat melech Mitzrayim. The king of Egypt, Pharaoh, dies. Vayeyanchu b'nei Yisrael mina avodah. And the people of Israel, they sigh from their work. Vayizaku, and that sigh seems to coalesce into a scream. Vata'al shavatam, and here's another Hebrew word for scream, their cry rises, El ha'Elohim, to God, min avodah, from their work. Vayishma Elohim et nakatam, and God hears that cry. Vayizkor Elohim et brito et Avraham et Yitzchak et Yaakov. And God, in response to hearing that cry, he remembers his covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Vayar Elohim et bnei Israel, and then God sees them. Vayeda Elohim, and God knows them.
Okay, good. And Ema, what would you make of that expression, and God knows? Notice that there's a lot of sense perception here. God hears their cry. God remembers the Brit. God sees the people of Israel. Yeda Elohim, God knows. If we play that little game we often play, which one of these things is not like the other? Vayishma, Vayizkor, Vayar, and Vayeda. Which one seems different than all the others?
Yeah, knowing.
Because there is no direct object. I hear your cry. I remember the Brit. I see Israel. But what do I know? Vayeda Elohim. God just knows. And it's almost as if God kind of takes all of that. What sense perception does, it's all of a metaphor for God. God doesn't have physical ears, but sense perception is the way we humans reach out to the world and perceive something and take it in. And when we've fully taken it in, we've known it. And God, so to speak, comes to know this, comes to fully take in the cries of the people and their suffering and his memories of the Brit. And when you fully take something in like that, you become moved. You experience it vicariously. We would call this empathy. What point of view are we being given when we understand God being empathetic in this way? Who understands that God is empathetic for the people?
Us, the reader?
Us, the reader, exactly. We are the only ones who know what's going on. Does Moses understand this?
It doesn't say that he does.
Does Israel understand it?
Definitely not. It seems
Do
like
their leaders understand it? No one understands this. The only one who understands this right now is the reader who's telling us is we the reader, because the narrator has chosen to tell us a secret. Right?
that's
Guess what?
fascinating, actually. That doesn't happen that much in the Torah, does it?
It doesn't.
Yeah. I hadn't
The,
noticed that. That's really interesting.
the narrator doesn't usually tell us secrets about God. Occasionally, we hear about that. We hear, for example, that when God destroyed the world, God was very sad about it, Vayit Atsev, right? That we hear about that. We hear that when God sanctified the Sabbath, he was really happy about it. But it's few and far between the moments where the narrator clues us in and says, hey, just want to tell you something about God that no one else knows, but just
Mm,
want you to know this. God is very empathetic. And it's a funny thing about empathy, because what does empathy drive you to do? When I really know what it's like to be you, when I really know what it's like to suffer the way you've suffered, when I really bring that into myself, it leads to action, right? And that's the next thing that happens. It's like God immediately is like, okay, I'm going to do something about this. And then we're off to the races with the story of the burning bush.
In the last few months, our listenership for this show has doubled, something that obviously could never have happened without all of you. So, to celebrate and say thank you, we want to give you a gift. We want to offer you an ebook written by Rabbi Foreman on his all time favorite text. You guessed it, the Garden of Eden. With the new Parsha cycle just around the corner, when we're all going to be diving back into the garden once again, hopefully this will make it really special for you this year. You've made the past year so special for us. There's a link in the description where you can let us know your email and we'll send you the book. Enjoy, and please let us know what you think.
And I want to suggest that there's a story that I never really even knew was there that's unfolding over the course of the burning bush. In the story of the burning bush, what's nominally happening is that God is trying to convince Moses to take the job of redeeming the people from Israel. But for some reason, Moses keeps on saying no. And for some reason, God keeps on pressing. So for the longest of times, that's all I understood about the story, right? Which is God keeps on pressing, Moses keeps on saying no. There's one excuse after another, right? But I never really noticed that something else is happening in the story, and it has to do with what we just saw. We just saw a secret intention on the part of God. He's really empathetic. His obstacle is, can he figure out a way to communicate that to people so that people actually get that that's really true? God is actually trying to make clear something. He's trying to take this intention of his, this feeling of his, this emotion of his, so to speak, this incredible feeling of empathy he has with the people, and he's trying to communicate it so that people will understand it.
got it. Okay. I understand. So basically, you have a God who nobody asked anything of, who's sort of overhearing everything. Even the
Mhm.
way the screams are described, they're not described as crying out to God, but it passively says "vatal shavatam," that
Yes.
like accidentally their screams went up to God's house, where that's where God happens to live. He
Right.
heard them, and then he knew something and had empathy. And you're saying in the next chapter wants to do something about it. So now he's got a challenge, which is
How is he going to be able to get them to believe that he actually cares about them, that he
Mhm.
actually deeply empathizes them? It's not as easy as you would think. Think about it. If you were God and you wanted to convince people that you were actually empathetic, that you really got it, right? You understood their suffering. Emu, what would stand in the way of that intention becoming manifest? Put yourself in the shoes of the people for a moment. Imagine that I, Moses, come along and I say, hey, guess what? I have a message to tell you about God.
Mhm.
Okay. And I want you to know he really empathizes with your pain. Give me a pushback.
I could think of a few. One is like, where were you yesterday? Where were
Yep.
you last year?
Right. I
Mhm.
was really suffering yesterday. Did you care yesterday?
Mhm.
Okay. That's one problem. What else?
Um, another might just be the fact that, like, really, like me and my suffering, that matters to you. Like, don't you have, you may have bigger fish to fry. Like, there's probably something going on in the Andromeda galaxy today.
Exactly.
And
That precisely. Right? Like God, not only are you in charge of 7 billion people here on Earth, but you've got a whole galaxy to manage, not to mention the rest of the universe, right? Who says that we matter so much? You're this incredible extraterrestrial master of the universe and you want me to believe that you care about little old me and my tears and that you're actually moved by that, that's a little too much to handle, right? So you've got some serious challenges in front of you, and it's not so easy to convey this in a way that it's really going to be believed, especially because part of being the master of the universe might just be like you had your reasons. There's unknowable reasons for why you couldn't have stepped in to actually turn the tables and uphold and upset history until now, right? Because and human beings are on a need to know basis, and in this world they don't get to know those things. So with them being unable to know those things, with them being these mysterious reasons why Israel had to undergo this exile, right? And the people are really in pain during that exile. How am I going to answer that question? What about yesterday? I have to somehow convince them that I care anyway. It's not an easy thing to do. And that, I think, underlies a lot of the conversation that we're about to see. So let's watch some of this unfold as we begin to see the conversation between Moshe and God take place at the burning bush. So we turn the page into chapter 3, and we get Moses. He's shepherding some sheep. He comes to this mountain, and he sees this thing. He sees this burning bush, a bush that's burning and burning and burning, Vasna einenu ukal, and the bush is not consumed. And one of the questions, by the way, is what's the great metaphor of the burning bush? Was there a reason why this miracle as opposed to any others? It seems like there is some sort of symbolic meaning to there being a bush that's on fire and not consumed. If you think about fire, so something actually goes up to heavens. What goes up to the heavens if there's something on fire?
Smoke.
And something went up to the heavens a few verses ago. What went up to the heavens a few verses ago?
The cries of the people.
Sounds like the cries of the people are almost analogous to the smoke from the fire, which means that the fire itself is what? And who's the bush?
I might argue that the people are the bush,
Mm.
and that they're in suffering. Like the
Yes.
fire is not particularly pleasant for a bush.
Yeah.
And while the bush isn't being consumed, there's smoke coming up from that bush. The cries of the people.
Exactly. And it's almost like here's this eternal nation that's like an eternal bush that God, through his inscrutable wisdom and desire, has decided is going to be an eternal nation and is not going to be destroyed in this otherwise civilization crushing event known as Egyptian slavery. But, it's a bittersweet thing to not be destroyed because at least if you're destroyed, it's over, right? But it's never over for them. And all you get is you're burning and you're burning and you're burning, and there's pain and there's pain and there's pain. And the cries from that pain come up to God, and God is like, oh man, my eternal nation, I made them eternal and they're suffering. I've got to do something. And I'm going to respond to the cry. So even in the metaphor of the burning bush, you begin to see God's empathy manifesting itself. God is recognizing there's this incredible pain that's coming up from the people. They're like this burning bush. So the angel first gets some formalities out of the way. Verse 5, Al tikrav halom, don't get too close. Shalna alecha mal raglecha, take off your shoes from your feet. Yamakam asher ta made lavad mat kodesh, because the place in which you are standing, it is holy ground. And Imu, why would it be holy ground?
I mean, they're at the Har Elohim Choreva. They're at
Yep.
Chorev. They're at the mountain of God that eventually would be the mountain on which the Torah is given. But already
Yes.
now there's a little revelation happening.
That's right. So if God is there, right, it's holy ground. This is God's space in the world. So God has taken over this little place in the world. It's holy ground. Take off your shoes. And then God introduces himself. And he says, I'm the God of your forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Moses covers his face, is worried about looking straight at God. And then God begins to get into the content of what he has to say. Now, notice that, if you took a sort of a more utilitarian view of the Exodus, and I would say, Imu, what's God's goal? What does he want to happen at the end of this whole process? What's he aiming for?
Deliverance. He's got to rescue the people from the bad guys in Egypt.
Yeah. And so I would expect God, who has just shown up to Moses, right, to be able to say, Moses, I'm the master of the universe. Pharaoh's the enemy. You are my chosen deliverer. And you have got a, boy, do I have a job for you. You are going to take the people out of Egypt, which, by the way, is the essence of what God does say to Moses at the very end of this little soliloquy, right?
Hmm.
A couple verses later, he says, "Va'ata lecha v'ashlach al Paro." I'm going to go send you to Pharaoh, and I want you to take the people out. But before he says that, he says something else. Read me from verse 7 in this story. This is God's introduction to Moses.
Vayomer Adonai, God says, Ra'o ra'iti et oni ami asher Mitzrayim. I've seen the suffering of my people that are in
Mhm.
Egypt. Ve'et akatam shamati mipnei nogsav. And I heard their screams from before their taskmasters, ki yadati et machovav, because I really understand, I know their afflictions, their pains.
Now, notice what's happening here. You, the reader, have already heard this before. You know
Yeah.
this from what the narrator has told you in an aside before the story. The difference is now someone else knows it too. Moses. God is communicating this to Moses, says, Moses, you got to believe this. I've heard the cries of the people. I know and I understand their suffering.
That is interesting, actually, what you're pointing out, because like we could have cut out the last 3 verses of the last chapter, and God could have revealed himself to Moshe and say, I just want to let you know I'm hearing all this stuff and I'm going to save you. So it does seem like it is a part of the story, the interaction between these screams to no one that God picks up and then knows, right? It actually
Mhm.
seems like it's important for us to understand that journey. That's very cool.
It's important for us to understand A, that God alone knows this in his numinous solitude, and B, that God is trying to communicate it now to Moses, which is another step in the process, but those aren't the same things,
Yep.
right? Yep.
Yep.
And by the way, if I wanted to be a truly ruthless editor, we've had our share of ruthless editors at Aleph Beta. If I would be a truly ruthless editor, I could say, you know what, all this empathy stuff, it's really misplaced. Just get to the good stuff. Start with verse 8, right? The first thing that should happen is God shows up and says, I'm the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, just letting you know, I'm going to come and take their children out of Egypt. Ered lahatzilo miyad Mitzrayim. I'm going to save this nation from Egypt. I'm going to bring them into this really great place, Eretz Zavat Chalav Udvash, Makom Aknani Achiti Vamori, the place of the Amorites, place of milk and honey. And that's what I'm going to do, and I want you to do it. Why is the empathy stuff even necessary? Who cares? It doesn't affect the game plan one way or the other. God's going to get them out of Egypt, and he's telling Moses, you're going to be my God. But no, the empathy is important. It's important for us to know that God is empathetic, and it's important for us to know that God is trying to get Moses to know that he's empathetic.
Yeah, that seems really, really interesting. There's the story of God's feelings about all of this, what he sees, what he hears, what he understands. This is not purely utilitarian. This is not just about rescuing the people.
Yes. And then God emphasizes it again, the empathy, and then what I'm going to do about it in verse 9. Go ahead.
Ve'ata, and now, Hinei tzakat b'nei Yisrael ba elai. The scream of Israel is coming to me. V'gam ra'iti et halachatz asher Mitzrayim lochatzim otam. Also, there's a lot of pressure and oppression that Egypt is oppressing them with, and I see that too. Ve'ata lecha ve'esh lachacha el paro. Now go, and I'm going to send you to Pharaoh. Ve'hotzei et ami b'nei Yisrael mitzrayim, and you'll take out my nation, b'nei Yisrael, from Egypt.
Yes. Okay. So this is God's opening salvo. Immediately, Moses resists. And what does he say? Read verse 11.
Remember Moshe el Elohim, Moshe says to God, Mi anochi ki elech al paro. Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh? V'chi otzi et b'nei Yisrael mi Mitzrayim, and that I should be the one to take out Israel from Egypt.
Little old me, I'm supposed to go before the king and do this. I don't think I can do that. And then God has got an answer for him. What basically is the answer? Read the beginning of verse 12.
Vayomer ki yaimach. God says, I'm going to be with you.
Just stop even right there. How did that even answer anything? What was God saying by saying ki yimach?
I mean, Moshe's principal objection is, who am I? And God's like, I'm God. So if I'm with you, you are everything, because I'm
Exactly.
everything.
You're not a nobody, you're a somebody. You got me on your side. I'm with you. I may be silent, but I'm there. I may be silent, but I'm there. Do you begin to see the metaphor for what Moses is going through on a very little individual level and what the people of Israel are going through on a national level?
Yeah, it's one of the questions I asked you when you had me play that game, which is little old me, like doesn't God have the Andromeda galaxy to take care of? Why would he want to
Mhm.
rescue little old me from Egypt? Moshe's doing that on his own. God, the like who is massive and infinite and endless, says, I've got a plan for you and I'd like you to do something. Moshe is like, what? Me of all people? Why me? Yeah.
Yeah. And God's solution is, yeah, but you know what? I may be the master of the universe and I may be really powerful, but guess what? When you think you're nothing, I'm there with you. I'm not even giving you any solution. Just the fact that you're not alone, that there's someone with you and it's me. You see how tender that is? God isn't really saying anything. He hasn't given him any incredible magic tricks. He hasn't given him any superpowers. He's just given him an emotional support, just saying, you're not going alone. I'm with you. And it's like, holy smokes, the same master of the universe who is in charge of the Andromeda galaxy cares enough about my emotions that he's worried about little old me being intimidated about Paro and says that, by the way, you should just know I'm with you, so don't feel so down, right? And you wonder, gee, if God is with Moses here, maybe was he with the people even before he redeemed them? Like he's not saying to Moses, I'm giving you the tools yet. I'm just with you. Like
Yeah.
maybe that's like with the people too. But go
Yeah.
ahead.
No, I just there's maybe somebody's listening to this at home, and there's an obvious question that's screaming at them, which is like, God is omniscient, God is omnipotent. Why can't he just snap his, metaphorical fingers and just teleport the people out? There isn't a story here if you have that lens on where everything is purely utilitarian. God doesn't even need Moshe, right? He doesn't need
Yes.
any of this. So it seems like the creator in his infinite wisdom is acting on the world in a way in which that which is utilitarian matters but is secondary. Like actually the feelings matter. God is like
Yes.
simulating listening to the cries of people, simulating newly understanding something. And what's shocking to me is that Moshe is taking the utilitarian perspective. you
Mhm.
know he's basically saying like,
How am I going to do this?
yeah, like I don't have the credentials. And God basically whispers back something that isn't utilitarian, right? He basically says, I'm with you. Like I'm not gonna deal with the logic of your problem. Just
Yeah.
understand I'm with you.
And it is shocking because you would think to do this massive thing to coerce the most important, significant empire that the world has ever known, Egypt, to release its hundreds of thousands of slaves, take a hit to their GNP, and let them go. Like, what does God have on his side? And you would say, well, the most important thing that God has on his side is he's God. He like
Right.
literally has unlimited power. And along comes God, and it's almost like, no, in this conversation, God is not actually prior. It's not really about power. It's not
Yeah.
about my power. It's about like there's something else I have. It's my ability to care. It's the fact that I am the most powerful being in the world and I actually care. Because you would think the more powerful you are, the
The
less
less you
likely
should
you
care.
are to actually care. You got
Hmm.
so many other things to worry about. But no, I'm really powerful and I can whisper in your ear and say, I'm right here for you. To me, that's what's so shocking about all this. Let's keep on reading. Moses isn't convinced. He comes back to God with another objection. And he says, okay, let's even say I go to Israel. I go to Israel and I say, the God of the Hebrews, he sent me to you. You know what they're going to ask me? They're going to ask me for your name. What should I tell them your name is? Right? Along comes God. And it's almost like he hasn't thought of that. Like, name? I don't know. I am what I am. right? And it's like, don't distract me with names. Like I'm a nameless being. I can't be named. Yeah, sure. Yeah, I am that which I am, or I'll be that which I will be. And then God drops one of the I will be's and says, Ko tamar li bnei Yisrael, yesh lachani aleichem. I will be has sent me to you. And then God says one last thing to Moses. But the name thing you want, I think we can come up with a name. Ko tamar b'nei Yisrael. Here's what you should tell them. Hashem, Yud Ke Vav Ke, Elokei Avotechem, Elokei Avram, Elokei Yitzchak, Elokei Yaakov, Shlachani Alechem. That it was Yud Ke Vav Ke who sent them to me. Yud He and Vav He. Zeh Shmi Lolam. That's going to be my name forever. Zeh Zichui L'Dor Dor. That's how I want to be remembered from generation to generation. And God has a very clever branding exercise. He took this idea of Yasher Yeh, this notion of existence, and he actually formulated it into a really clever acronym is Yud.He.Vav.A. It is this idea of existence. I am the being God, the being in past, the being in present, and the being in future. If you take the Hebrew words for being and past, present, and future, Haya, Hove, and Yiyeh, you overlay them on each other, you get Yud.He.Vav.He. God says, I'm the being God. Now, I want to propound a little theory here. The theory I want to propound is this little moment right here. This is the revelation of the name Yud He and Vav He in the Torah. It's like he's taken off guard. He doesn't have a name. And then he comes up with a name. Says, here's my name. Zeh Shmi Lolam. This is how I want to be remembered. Zeh Zichui L'Dor Dor. For all generations know me by this name. This is the revelation of this name. Now you'll come and tell me, but Foreman, how could that be true? I've read all of Genesis and I see the name Yud He Vav He all over the place. I've read all of Exodus before. I see the name Yud He Vav He all over the place. How could you tell me this is the revelation of the name? The answer is this is actually the revelation of the name. After this, the Torah is given at Sinai. Once the Torah is given at Sinai, God goes back and having introduced himself by this name, whenever the name is relevant, God inserts it in the text. And so we who read the text encounter this name, but historically, this is how the name came to be. Now, we have a lot of Aleph Beta stuff on this. And there's a video somewhere where we talked about this, but it's not really a video, it's the rabbis.
What?
And
They anticipated our video?
they anticipated our video. And it's a famous Rashi. And what Rashi says is that deep at the heart of Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh was something else that God was saying to Moses. It was actually an expression of empathy. It wasn't just an ontological reality or an existential reality. God is who he is or will be who he will be, right? It's God was saying, not just I will be that which I will be, but I will be there for you the way I have been there for you. It's God has introducing himself not just as the God of being, a philosophical concept, but in the words of the rabbis, the God of being there, the God of empathy. The way the rabbis put it is they say, go tell the people that I am with them in empathy. I feel for them. I feel their pain. And you should just know that the same way that I feel their pain now, I feel their pain forever in all future sorrows. The same God that understands their sorrow now is the same God who will hear them in the future and understand their sorrow then. Moshe then said, God, they can't even understand that. They're so in the depths of their sorrow now, they can't hear about future sorrow. So God said, all right, leave out one of the ayahs. Just put one ayah in, but then said, you know what? Let's call me Yud He and Vav He, the God of being in past, present, and future, or the way the rabbis would have it, the God of being there for you or being with you. And that means something. Even before I redeem you, I'm there with you. And Emu, what's so fascinating about the rabbi's interpretation, I think, is that the rabbis are actually stitching together the first part of God's conversation with Moses with the second part. Because let's remind ourselves what happened right before Moses asked God for his name. Before that, Moses had been worried what he's going to tell Pharaoh. And God said, you know what? If you're worried about how little old you is going to go to Pharaoh, I'll be with you. Doesn't that feel better? I'm with you. You're not so lonely. I didn't even do anything. I'm just with you. I'm there with you. And then Moses is like, okay, fine, but what's your name? All God's really doing is repeating the same idea. He's saying, you know what my name is? My name is what I just told you. That quality that I'm the master of the universe, I'm completely unknowable, but I can still be there with you. I can still have compassion for you. That's not just for you personally, that's for the whole people. You go tell the people that. I am the unknowable God who's outside of time, who blends past, present, and future all together. But in that unknowableness of my being, I'm not just being, I'm being with you in all of my unknowableness of past, present, and future all mushed together, I'm being with you. We'll even have a name for it, the Yud, Hey, and Vav, Hey God. And the same sense that I was there with you, Moses, you can communicate that I'm there with them too. The way the rabbis understand this, again, what is God trying to communicate? I actually care. It's crucial for them to know that I actually care. Before I take them out, they have to know that I care.
It's I feel special to do this again with you because we have learned these ideas many times before, but I don't think I
Mhm.
ever really grasped where the sages were coming from, or even you when you elucidated their words until now, because there is a problem in the text, which is God and Moshe are going back and forth about names, and God keeps saying, "I'm going to be with you. I'm going to be with you, Moshe. I'm going to be with the people." And then it seems like out of the blue, I don't think I realized that he changes his answer. He
Mhm.
says Yud and Hey and Vav and Hey,
Mhm.
and what you and the sages are saying is that there is no change in the answer.
Right.
He just keeps finding ways to say, "I will be with you." And it's pretty rich to understand it as not just here's God's arbitrary name, but rather that God wove this name together to communicate that I'm going to be with you.
Yeah, you know what's interesting actually, even as you're saying that, I struck me as something really chilling. This new name, Yud Hey and Vav Hey, which is being with without reference to time. I can be with you through all phases of time, past, present, and future. Look at the last words God says. Tell them it's Yud Hey Vav Hey who sent them to you. Zeshmi la'olam, v'zeh lador dor. What does Zeshmi la'olam mean? This will be my name, la'olam. Translate it,
Mm. Forever, or maybe
which means
for the
from
future.
now going forward.
Yeah.
Now, zezichri lador dor. What does that
Mm.
mean?
Zichri is remembrance. This is my remembrance in generations. You could argue Leolam is going forward, Zichri is going backward.
And together, it's the way we humans interpret eternity. La'olam is from now forward, Zezichri is from now backwards. And so you humans also have eternity. You have an eternity of generations from now going backwards, from now going forward. This is my name for all of that. But what is my name? My name is eternity, being with in an eternal kind of way.
So the other thing is that's at the tip of my tongue, and I'm still trying to process it, is why should it be that God's communication of I'm going to be with you for real has anything to do with like the collapse of time, right? Like, oh, let me just tell you, I'm past, I'm present, and future. Therefore, you should really, really feel like I'm being with you.
A very
Um,
interesting question, and maybe a really interesting question for Rosh Hashanah of all things. Because what is Rosh Hashanah? It's a day so bound up in memory,
mm,
seemingly not just in our memory of something that happened, but hopefully in God's memory too. It's a day in which we call upon God to remember. And somehow God's memory is just even bound up in his name, right? That when God introduces him as Yud Hey Vav Hey, it's almost like know me as this, almost like God has the unique ability to collapse time in ways that we could never imagine. And part of that, we humans might express as memory. God remembers, but for God, maybe it's not so memory. Maybe for God, past is present and future is present. It's all one thing.
that's pretty trippy, right? Like just stopping for a second, just to forget about the future, but like an understanding that what memory is a collapse of time, because it's almost like memory is the answer to a problem of distance, right? Like
Yes.
I had this moment when I first met my wife, and it was such a special memory, and it was such a special moment, and it was charged and incredible, and then you travel away from that moment, and it doesn't seem to travel with you, but for memory, right? Memory can take me, 15 years later and collapse time and bring me back again to that moment, and somehow like the energies of that moment are with me, Emu, 15 years later. That's a really interesting way of thinking about memory. But it sounded like what you were saying is for God it doesn't work quite like that. He's not only remembering, maybe he's using those words because that's what it's like for us, but he's perpetually collapsing time. So the juices, the energy of every moment that has happened and will happen are always with him. And somehow that collapse of time translates into a God who is being with us more. That's interesting.
Seemingly, yes. Yes. God is uniquely situated to truly be with us because whereas we can only remember our past sorrow, God can experience it in a way that outstrips our ability to, perhaps. Okay, Emu, but in truth, all of this, the beginnings of the burning bush, the notion of empathy, God trying to convince Moshe of this, God trying to give Moses some insight into what it means for him to be this incredible God of being who's outside of time but is connected in an empathetic, emotional way with the people. All of this is just the beginning of the story because something is about to happen in the burning bush, which frankly I never realized was there. There's a role for a new character in the story of the burning bush that I frankly am embarrassed to tell you I all but ignored. And that
There's another
character
character at the burning
shows
bush.
up. That's right. That character shows up in the very next verse.
Oh no, I'm back. And this kind of sounds like concluding music. I know what you're thinking. Are they really going to stop the episode there? Well, it turns out Robbie, our producer on this season, took Rabbi Foreman's crack about ruthless editors to heart and decided to cut him off mid-thought. Or he thought this would make a great cliffhanger. Or both. Only he really knows, and we are at his whim. Either way, we are pausing here in our journey through the Exodus story. And at this point, we've covered some significant ground. We've seen a possible origin point to what spurred God to begin the redemption process in his empathetically hearing Israel's cries. We've got a beautiful read of the burning bush and the introduction to the name of Yud-Keh Vav-Keh, seeing it as God trying to communicate that empathy to Moshe and eventually the people. But we still haven't gotten a clear connection between this read of the beginning of Exodus and the sounding of the shofar at Sinai, Jericho, or Rosh Hashanah. That will come through our read of the second part of the story, as we get to the mysteriously overlooked character Rabbi Foreman just mentioned. It seems their presence changed Rabbi Foreman's reading of this story somehow, and sparked him to ask the question, did Moshe fully receive the message that God was sending him? Did he convey it the way God wanted him to? And if he didn't, what might the consequences of that be on the rest of the Exodus story, all the way to the revelation at Sinai? We'll find out next time. Before you go, please give me 90 more seconds of your time. And yes, this is the part where I'm going to ask you for money. And yes, I know most of you are reaching for the play next button if you haven't already pressed it. The thing is, A Book Like No Other is going to be 3 years old in January. And over that time, thousands of you have joined us on this journey, which means a lot to us. But every time you run one of these ads asking for your support, crickets. Now, I'm not trying to make you feel guilty, though it is the season. We have the show free because we want you to have access to it. But I do want to give you just a little bit of context. Your average conversational podcast, it's just that, a conversation. It takes maybe a half a day to record, half a day to edit, not a huge investment or expense. But that's not this show. This show starts with Rabbi Foreman doing extensive research, trial teaching the material, finding the best path through. That takes time, as does our post-production stage. When you're dealing with nuanced arguments and intricacies, editing gets a lot more complicated. Our producers aren't just taking out the ums and likes, they're making sure that every detail is clear and every season is exciting. Given what goes into it, a single 4 or 5 episode season can take months to create. And trust me, every step is a labor of love, one we want to continue doing as long as we can. But we really do need your support to make that possible. So if you like what we do,
please consider signing up for an Aleph Beta membership. You'll gain access to our entire library, plus bonus material and invites to events. But above all, it's just a great way to show that this matters to you and that you respect the effort that goes into it. Thank you so much for listening. And of course, if membership isn't right for you, thank you still for being a part of our community. Okay, guilt trip over.